Afrotech 2017, San Francisco, California. Jewel Burke-Solomon, co-founder and at the time CEO of PartPick, a computer vision company, is on stage being interviewed by Angela Benton about the recent acquisition of PartPick by Amazon. She describes the thought process and journey she experienced reconciling selling a company she worked so hard to build.
5 or 6 months or so was the process end to end. But like I said, I wasn't in the market to sell. So it was a very big adjustment in my mind to go from I'm just running really fast to, oh, someone wants to buy the company. Right. What does that mean? You know, are we ready for that? All these questions came up. And I think the good thing that helped me make a decision about whether or not I was ready to sell was that when I started the company, I had a vision of being acquired by Amazon.
Really?
Yeah. So okay. I wrote it on a sheet of paper. These are the top 5 companies that I think we would be a good fit for. Mm-hmm. And Amazon was at the top of the list because I knew from the technical perspective, they had a visual search function. And that's something that they were interested in as far as making it super simple for everybody to find products that you can buy on Amazon and the various ways you can do that. And then obviously they sell the types of products that we were able to recognize. So I thought they would be a good fit. So I say that to say, at the beginning, I thought that, and I think that will help inform your decision as far as do you actually want to sell 3 or 4 years in? Because some people, it's probably not the right thing to do because they're not where they want to be yet, or that's just not what they see for themselves, or they want to take the company public, or whatever the reason. So that helped me make a decision a little bit because I was like, Jewel, this is what you said you wanted, right? So it's here. Hello. You have to take this opportunity. But it was incredibly, probably the hardest decision that I've ever made, just because PartPick was my baby. Even now, if I see people or, they ask me, what do you do? The first thing that wants to come out of my mouth is PartPick because it still feels like a child. And that's a big thing for founders, I think, is you get so tied up in your business that the idea of selling it is a hard one to kind of grapple with.
I'm Will Lucas, and this is Black Tech, Green Money. I'm going to introduce you to some of the biggest names, some of the brightest minds, and brilliant ideas. If you're black in building or simply using tech to secure your bag, this podcast is for you. Tristan Walker is the founder and CEO of Walker & Company Brands, which includes the brands Bevel and FORM, both designed to meet the health and beauty needs of people of color. He's also founder and board chairman of Code 2040, which matches high-performing Black and Latino undergrad and graduate coders and software engineering students with Silicon Valley startups for internships. He sits on the board of directors for both Foot Locker and Shake Shack. And with that, I asked him about what made him decide to pack up the family and chart a new course in Atlanta.
Before I am the CEO of Walker & Company, I am a black man, I am a black father, and I am a black husband. So every decision that I make is in line with my personal values, which happen to match my company's, but they're in line with my personal values and the happiness of my family, right? There are 3 things that I care about: my faith, my family, and my work, in that order, right? So the initial decision was really driven by the first 2, right? The faith and family. I've been in Silicon Valley since 2008. It is the only place that I've ever lived that got less diverse. Right? It's like, and cut among a bunch of different ways, right? Wealth, race, etc., opportunity. And that didn't sit too well for me. My wife and I, when we decided, hey, we wanted to consider Atlanta for a number of reasons, not only personally, but also for the business. That's where our consumers are. That's where the culture is. It's very Walker & Company. We said, let's go give it a shot, right? And we were in the process of negotiating with, Procter & Gamble to go. We went, took my son, came back. My son was 4 at the time, and I'll never forget this moment. I was walking him to the grocery store. He said, Dad, in Atlanta is where all the black people are. In Palo Alto is where all the white people are.
Wow.
The 4-year-old. Who had the sense to recognize that. And then I had to have the sense to realize how privileged he was and how I am He went to some of the best schools, daycares, among other things, in Palo Alto. And I rationalized and remembered and reconciled with the fact that he had no Black classmates. He had no Black teachers, right? And that became a huge problem for me and my wife, who's also an educator. So, for our own personhood, our family, right? My wife, as an educator, now she teaches at a school that's majority Black girls. My son gets to go to school with kids who look like him, as a Black headmaster, right? And Black folks within positions of leadership. And we're in Atlanta with a lot of folks who look like me, who kind of appreciate the culture. So all that, even before I get to the business part.
Wow. Wow.
And the business part just became additive to the expression.
Yeah, I want to dig on this Atlanta thing because Atlanta changed my life. Like, I'm from Ohio, from the Midwest, like 40 minutes from Detroit, and so Atlanta was the first place that I saw Black wealth in young people that looked like me, and they were in franchising or they owned real estate, or et cetera. So when you talk about what you see, what your son even noticed at 4 years old, I found to be true in my own life story, because it showed me not only was it possible, but I had representation.
Yeah. There's a proactivity there in playing from a position of strength that I care deeply about. I mean, every single thing that I've done is really about the celebration of Black economic empowerment. Everything that I will do will be in line with the celebration of Black economic empowerment. And I think Atlanta is a wonderful platform, right, to help promulgate that message even further than I've tried to over the past decade.
You've gone on the record as saying Black culture leads all global culture, which I thought was fantastic for you to take that stance, even beyond the factual nature of it. For people who this is a newly realized concept or an ignored concept, can you break down how this is true?
Yeah, it's important to start by saying people who don't understand it are very much in the minority, right? So there's actually data here. Like 80% of white folks believe this to be true, right? Like, I'll show you all types of Nielsen data, et cetera. I just say what already exists, right? It's just true. You think about food, music, dance, right? We influence everything. And now, like, what's kind of beautiful about it, you think folks of color a little bit more broadly, the influence together, the amalgamation of all these kind of cultures together to create this new culture, the youth that's coming up and how they're getting raised, right? And to kind of expand what our influence on that culture looks like. People of color, the majority of the world right now. It's not a niche opportunity. We should all be respected in our cultural perspective. But it comes from Black folks, right? And again, the celebration of that economic empowerment is not without a celebration of our cultural impact.
So other cultures have made products for us for so long. And why was it important to design, develop, and manufacture these products for ourselves?
Yeah, I think because, a lot of people made products for us, but that doesn't mean that they were good. We deserve to have products that work well for us. Look, we should be treated not like second-class citizens. We deserve an experience that's just as great as anybody else's experience. Our cultural impact deserves it and requires it. Our purchasing power deserves it and requires it, right? And our unique difference deserves it and requires it. And I've been fortunate and blessed. I just came off a conversation, actually. At Walker and Company, I've spent the majority of my professional career at. I'm still a relatively young dude, right? But I've been able to mold the overwhelming majority of my professional career around what matters to me. And again, it's a celebration. So I don't know any alternative very much, right? And the fact that the makeup of my company is also representative of the culture that we love so much is just wonderfully inspiring for me, right? And to be able to show people from a position of strength that we matter, right? And our unique difference matters, and our culture matters, and our purchasing power matters. It's hard for people to rebut that.
I think, to be quite honest, we owe you, a lot of gratitude, because, I remember you told a story of, walking down the aisle and seeing the products made for Black people. And it was always, a Billy Ocean looking dude on the S-Curl box that was dusty on, and it was, that doesn't represent the lot of us. right?
Yeah.
And but it wasn't even beyond that. It wasn't a taken care of shelf space, right? And I think, Walmart came out, I think it was 6 months ago, maybe it was even less than that, that they weren't going to put our products behind cages anymore.
Yeah.
And I believe like a lot of that is due to your advocacy and your evangelism of this stuff. So yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, my evangelism is only so good as our consumers' willingness to support what we support, right? I could talk all the time, but if we weren't doing the work, it wouldn't matter. And I think the fact that we were seeing results from the work made other people stand at attention, right? It took too long. I mean, this industry has been around 200 years. Like, why did it take us to kind of break that barrier, right? But we got to do the work, right?
Facts.
Time lasts forever. We're just one bit on that timeline. And I'm not going out without having some impact attributed to the work that I try to do every single day in partnership with my colleagues.
It seems like there's still yet so many verticals where a Black perspective or building from a perspective of ethnic identity could be valuable. What is the opportunity Black people have, or how should we be thinking about building products for people who look like us and have similar issues and et cetera?
I mean, you gotta be yourself. I've the wonderful thing about creating things for this audience and having an employee base that represents the diversity of this audience is that we can selfishly make things for ourselves. We're more alike than we are different. And, that's not only the, ingredients that go into a bottle, it's the language that goes onto that bottle. It is the imagery that we share out with the world. How do we inspire ourselves with things that we felt that we deserve to have created for ourselves? So, as folks think about kind of making the choice between kind of serving consumers or Black consumers specifically, I think you consider a couple things. Number one, why wouldn't you authentically focus on this audience that's culturally relevant and authentic, has greater purchasing power in various categories than everyone else, right? And again, when you loop in kind of other folks of color, we're the majority of the world. I think it is the primary thought that should be on the minds of every entrepreneur. It should be the primary thought on the minds of every large business. And I'm going to be undying in my commitment to evangelize that because it's good business and a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had this conversation with Morgan DeBon, who's CEO of Black Video, on episode 1, and it was about building products for us. And she said, when she was talking to investors in the early days, they were asking her if she was already limiting her reach because she was only going to focus on Black people. And she was like, have you heard of Brazil? Have you heard of, all Europe and all these different places where we are, the UK and Canada, all over the world. And I wonder if, now that I hear you say that, I'm wondering if it is intentionally divisive, potentially, that we don't get taught to us that we have the buying power that we have, that our dollar can build billion-dollar companies, and et cetera. I don't want to indict anybody, but I'm thinking through this now. Like, we haven't been taught that if you build it for Black people, you can actually build a real business.
Yeah. I think and I'm a victim of this too, because I come from it, of relegating our thoughts on business with what venture capitalists believe it should be. I find myself jealous, not of the folks who raise all this money and sell for $1 billion. I actually find myself jealous of the small business owner who's Black, making $1 million to $2 million a year in profit every year. You've never heard of him or her, right? Installing HVAC, systems into homes, right? And they have a freedom that doesn't require the opinion of anybody. So I think, yes, we have been unfortunately kind of taught what actually isn't true. Black folks have driven the economic engine, right, in ways that have been unseen to this country, right? So it's important that we also recognize that there are other folks who didn't need a dime from a venture capitalist to realize their vision, right? have their own definition of what success is. That is very different from, in a lot of ways, folks who go through the Silicon Valley kind of way, right? It's very binary thinking. There are ways to hit your singles and your doubles, right, and your triples. And the power of compounding really kind of gives you the RBIs, like over and over and over and over and over again. And that's the wealth creation stuff, right? So yes, I think it's unfortunate that we have been kind of given this story that's inevitably not true and dictated by the laziness and the apathy of the moneyed interests to actually learn to rid themselves of their ignorance. But there's power in the entrepreneurs who haven't needed their calls, right? Who knew that there was an inevitability to the demographic shift in terms of numbers, the cultural influence in terms of numbers, the purchasing power in terms of numbers, and have been way ahead of the game before me or Morgan or a lot of the other Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who desire kind of those large outcomes.
Tristan has been named one of Fortune magazine's 50 world's greatest leaders, USA Today's Persons of the Year, Ebony magazine's 100 most powerful people, Vanity Fair's Next Establishment, Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40, Ad Age Creative 50, The Hollywood Reporter's Digital Power 50, and Black Enterprise's 40 Next. Today, at around 35 years old, he sits on 2 publicly traded corporate boards, Foot Locker and Shake Shack. So should more Black people have a desire to sit on corporate boards? Tristan speaks on it.
I pause because I have to recognize a couple of things. Number one, my own privilege. I have to check my privilege, right? I am a cisgender Black man who, regardless of how I was brought up, right, I ended up going to a boarding school and full scholarship. I have a Stanford MBA. I sold a company that was important to me. I am the first Black CEO in Procter & Gamble's history. I sit on 2 public boards, right? The compound interest of my privilege has kind of scaled. So I want to make sure that any answer that I offer kind of abstracts away the privilege that I've received. So let me kind of suggest this. It's only as important as you want it to be, right? For me, this idea of freedom is something that I didn't really understand until I sold the company. In December 13th of 2018, I realized that what freedom really means is not owing anybody anything. You pay back your investors. You give your employees a good outcome. Your acquirer, you don't really owe, right? Like, it's my duty to continue to do what I'm doing, but there's power in not feeling like you have to owe anybody anything anymore. And that's a feeling that I never want to give away. And it's also a feeling that I want people to have. So this idea for me around celebrating Black economic empowerment really centers around that theme of freedom for me. So for me, it's important to be on these boards, right? Because I want to help quickly realize that vision for other people to the extent that they feel that there are barriers towards their attainment of doing it, right? I am on 2 public boards. I got there as a 35-year-old Black man. It is possible, right? Certainly with respect to kind of the privilege that I've had, but even more than that, it's not just that I'm on the board. Like, I'm on the governance committee and the nominating committee of these boards, right? I can have some influence on, how our frontline employees, the majority of whom look like me, are treated, to our inevitable kind of shareholder interests, right? But also, how do we help them grow, right? How do we help them see that, there are folks, whether they look like me or that gentleman or woman, as I mentioned earlier, running that profitable HVAC installation company, right? It's my job to evangelize it. Corporate boards aren't for everybody. And folks can find as much impact building a wonderful, profitable business. I like to say progress and resistance isn't a 1-lane highway. I chose this lane because I think I have a unique point of view to help evangelize kind of my celebration of Black economic empowerment. That small business owner that's building something profitable for us, that's another lane. right? And it's important, the destination is, let's get to the same destination together. But it's just a lane. So I don't want to have a kind of carte blanche assumption that everybody's potential participation on the board is right. Much in the same way that everybody's running their own company also isn't right, right? We need to figure out what we are uniquely qualified to do and do that to the benefit of all of us. So rising tides lift all boats.
So I'm going to flip that question and say, what is the corporate imperative to placing people of color in these board roles?
I mean, the imperative is something that we all know. It leads to more profitable outcomes. I mean, it's like it's staring everybody in the face. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, right? And I've been very blessed and fortunate to have like a whole bunch of press about me, the company, and all that stuff. And I remember I was on Bloomberg the other day. We had a wonderful conversation about diversity. And I paused and I said, I've been very fortunate, very privileged to have so much press. Bloomberg was the first kind of TV interview I've ever done. If you go back, you'll see I was saying the exact same things 10 years ago, right? Like, what has changed? And I felt that it was their duty to continue to hold corporations accountable to the things that they promised. And one of the things that you hear them talk about all the time is how diversity leads to more profitable outcomes. Well, why aren't you why aren't you doing everything in your remote possibility to get this done, right? Like, it is a strategic priority. And that's the thing that I think I love so much about the potential for governance, right? And sitting on the boards. My job is not to run the company. That's management's job. And I know, folks have had terrible boards, right? So I know what it's like to have a board that's overbearing. But from my perspective, or as it relates to governance and having diversity lead to more profitable outcomes, research that we've all read, right? Let's keep driving that home until it starts to get realized. And folks like Foot Locker, Shake Shack are realizing it, certainly at the board level. Look, again, 35-year-old Black man who's gotten these opportunities, but it's a start. And this thing is going to take some time, but now I have a seat at the table to help catalyze it.
Love that. For people who do sit in these prominent corporate positions, whether they be on the board or high-level executives, what is your thought process for how to remain authentic to your values, speak up about issues that matter to you from a cultural standpoint without jeopardizing opportunities?
Yeah, and again, privilege. I have privilege, right? So let me separate it. It's so important to me, right? Because look, I got to support, my Black sisters, right? I got to support my Black trans folks, right? Like, I've got to and not everybody has it as I'm not going to say as easy as I've had it. But I think a lot of folks have nuanced difficulties that they face that I'll never understand. So it's really, really, really important for me to suggest that. But I'd also say, and this goes to values, I wrote them down. And I defined them, and I wrote those definitions down. And I've tried my best. I really, really, really do. And I encourage people to check me on it now when it's not the case, that I make every decision in line with those things because I defined it. And I try, and at least for my team, to help evangelize what the same personal values I have are the same corporate values. Because I started the company, I'm like, wow, I want to work around people who are like me from a values perspective. We can all be different people, but our values match. Because why should I be hanging around anyone who doesn't share any of the values that I have? But it also equips folks who might not have had the language to call people out when they do things that are out of line with those values, right? So whether it's a junior person talking to senior folks, now they have the language that doesn't necessarily make them feel chastised. It's something that we've all agreed with. You went through our interview process, you know what they are. They're defined. They're in our annual review process, right? It's very clear and it's very objective. So, when I kind of talk about authenticity, it's important to just know who you are, right? And know what you're willing to not do. And values force you to pick a side. And you tend to find allies more quickly than you anticipate once you define what those values are. And we're all works in progress, right? Like, I'm not 100% there. Even if I'm 60, 65% there, it's much better than not knowing who I am. and it forces you to really get a sense for who you are, what you stand for, and the folks around you. And it's required a lot of, you know, tough conversations, honest conversations, self-reflection. I have a wonderful wife who like forces me to, you know, improve my emotional quotient. And I very much thank her for that. But she also reminds me of the privileges that I have, right? And the privileges my sons will have. And it's important for me to abstract those two away for the reasons that I already articulated.
Several organizations have develop people for board positions, but in reality, and from experience also, is many of these nominations come from direct relationships, right? And how can these relationships be built, and how do we raise our hand for these types of roles?
Yeah, that's a big one. Know that this stuff takes time. I think there are a lot of people who know that this is broken. Yeah, we have an access problem, but also there's an awareness problem. A lot of people don't even know that this is an opportunity for them, right? So, you know, let's kind of shout this stuff from the mountaintops, like, here's a viable path forward. And also knowing what boards do, right? Because I think it sounds sexy, but there's work, right? And there's work that you need to know that you're contributing to as a legal fiduciary and steward of the business. And look, it's no different from knowing that you want to get in and, you know, a lot of people come and say, hey, you know, I want to start a company. And my first question to them is, do you want to run it? And they very rarely have an answer for that, right? And they're two very different things. So I'd almost ensure that, you know, when folks kind of look at board seats, know why you want one and know what are the things that you can potentially do to help other people, if you get one, to acquire that same thing. So I'm still kind of going through that process myself. So as far as like, you know, how do we open up the opportunities for network? There are some wonderful kind of organizations like the ELC, Executive Leadership Council, right? Among others, that help folks kind of get trained around how to run a board, how to be a part of a board. I mean, there are a lot of entrepreneurs right now who can get the requisite training, right, to know what it takes to build a board with proper governance. You know, by this time, I had run my company as a chairman of the board, Code 2040, you know, that I helped found. I was a chairman of that board, so I had some perspective, albeit from kind of Walker & Company Code 2040 around what it took. I didn't do it in $1 billion company, but I had a respect for what governance meant. And then, you know, I think once I saw other folks on the board and know that I had access to them, I would reach out to them and just have a conversation. The way I got to the Foot Locker board, and, you know, Shake Shack came because I was on the Foot Locker board. But there's a woman, Rosalind Brewer, who is such an inspiration, friend, advisor, mentor of mine. Roz is the CEO at Starbucks.
Yeah, a rock star.
She's on the board of Amazon. I got to know Roz when she was the CEO of Sam's Club. And that's because, you know, when I started kind of the company, we're in health and beauty, we're trying to figure out what channel to distribute. And we just had a conversation just about, you know, what it takes to, you know, succeed in the corporate environment. And we've been kind of fast friends for years now. So when I was ready and I had sold the company, we just had breakfast and I just asked her for her thoughts. Like, am I ready for this? Right? It wasn't me saying, hey, I want to do this. It was her helping me understand if I was prepared for it, right? As someone who actually has had the experience. So some of it is just raising the hand, being vulnerable, and having willingness to reach out to folks to have that conversation before you say that it's something that you want to do, right? Because if you've never done it before, you don't necessarily know. And it may be the case that you don't want to do it, right? Where you can kind of focus on another lane that's contributory to the success and uplifting of Black folks. So long-winded, verbose way of saying, number one, know what your values are. Are your values leading you towards this potential decision? What do you want to do if you are kind of blessed with the opportunity to be on that board? And then also, at least for me, you know, I think a lot of people look at Foot Locker and Shake Shack and think, wow, like two wonderful consumer brands. But you know what? It wasn't just that I wanted to be on the board. I wanted to be a part of companies that had respect for the demographic shifts happening in the country and the cultural impact of Black people. I wanted to be a part of companies that, you know, consider brands and great brands as a force for good. And I wanted to, consider companies that respected technology, not only its impact on the business, but also the unseen or forgotten, right? Walker and Company's done that. Code 2040's done that. Procter & Gamble's doing it. Foot Locker's doing it. Shake Shack is doing it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I've been blessed because I know what's important to me, because I know what my values are, to almost have these opportunities come without my kind of asking for them. All the experience I've had prepared me for it, but prepared me in a way that was truly authentic to other folks who might be chasing the same thing.
Love it. Civic and social board appointments are a lot easier to achieve. Corporate boards, especially ones that have retainers involved, much harder. When people are, I want you to talk about the interview process and when people are going through that process of board review, they're being nominated. What is the interview process like? How do you negotiate the retainer? Or if it's a negotiation, they may just say, we pay $10, you got $10, or you out. Can you talk about just what that process is like?
Yeah, so I'll start in reverse. So part of governance, you can't really negotiate it because remember, you're fiduciary of the shareholder, so there is a standard by which your contribution will yield whatever compensation has been agreed on by the board and shareholders, right? So, certainly if you're part of certain committees, then there might be kind of additional compensation for that, but it's pretty standard. And you can do that work well in advance of even getting through the process. It's all a part of the public reporting that's out there, and you can see how much I'm compensated, right? Or anybody else on any board that you want for public companies. The interview process, at least for me, was very unique. And I'll tell you how it worked for Foot Locker, and then I'll tell you how it worked for Shake Shack. Met with Roz Brewer on a Wednesday. She was in Atlanta. She spends time between Atlanta and Seattle. I asked her, am I ready for it? She said, Tristan, I think this is a great time. I want to connect you with a recruiting firm that's local to Atlanta that does a lot of great work on executive placement, board placement. I met with this partner on Friday of that same week. We had an hour. For the first 59 minutes, we just talked about my life. I grew up in Queens, humble beginnings, all these opportunities have come my way. Tech, P&G, Walker and Company, that sort of thing. Minute 59, she looked at me. She said, Tristan, I have an idea. I can't promise you anything because they're doing final round interviews on Monday, right? I'm going to have to reach out to the lead director to see if there's a there. And she said, it's Foot Locker. And at that point, my eyes opened. I had to maintain my decorum because I'm like, man, I can't look like a fool here. Foot Locker, has been a part of my life since I was 12. I remember buying, sneakers out of the East Bay with money orders. I am OG Foot Locker, and they're, East Bay champs, Foot Act. That's all she had to say. Say no more, right? She called me on a Sunday. She's like, they'd like to meet with you. I flew out to meet with the lead director that Tuesday. I guess that went well. Then I met with the head of nominating governing committee over Zoom that Thursday. That went well. The following week, I flew out to New York to meet with the CEO for 3 hours. We walked the stores, that sort of thing. And that went well. And a month later, I was asked to join the board. That is a really fast process. But I think it was really spearheaded by the fact that they were already in last round interviews. So it got me through it. And there's a window of nomination because they wanted us. It was me and another kind of board member who joined together. So originally they were thinking one, I came in and then they put both of us on, which is really, really great. The second time, at least for Shake Shack, I was speaking with a buddy of mine, Josh, who runs Etsy. We had a fireside one-on-one chat in Brooklyn at Etsy, just talking about kind of diversity, inclusion, and what it means. And Etsy does some really wonderful work here that deserves to be lauded. But we had a side conversation. I'm like, I'm thinking about I'm going through this board process, and he said, I'm on the board of Shake Shack. and I looked at him and I was like, I want to join that board. Right. I just had the kind of bold thought to just say it. Right. And the worst you can say is no. Yeah. Right. So lesson number one, you don't get what you don't ask for. Kind of shrugged it off. He was like, we're not really looking yet, but let me connect you to Randy, the CEO. Connected me the following week over email. And this was in December, I believe. We had some back and forth. We couldn't meet because he was busy, holidays, all that stuff. And then we planned some time to meet in January. And I'll never forget this. It was mid-January. I was about to get on my flight or on my way to the airport to fly to New York to meet with him just for the day. And, he was on his way back from China. And that was the first time I heard about the seriousness of COVID-19. Because he was like, hey, Tristan, up to you, but I'm going to send a note to my team that I'm going to just go on quarantine for the extreme precaution for 14 days. And at that point, I was like, you know what, let's kind of reschedule and figure it out. So then February hit, and we started to hear about COVID-19 more. And then March, we were like, hey, let's just talk, right? We do a Zoom chat because this is starting to become a new normal. We had a chat. He liked me. Next person I met was Danny Meyer, the chairman of the board. And then at that point, I guess it became a process,
okay.
right?
Okay.
Because they weren't looking at the time. And then I just started to get invites in my email to meet other board members. And a couple of weeks later, I was asked to join. And then we announced in about a little over a month ago. So again, I revert back to this idea, like, yes, my access got me there, but also a little bit of bold action in my asking, because I knew what I wanted at that point. I had done my research around kind of what public boards meant, what my responsibility was. I was prepared for that moment. I had time, having kind of merged our companies with Procter & Gamble, to really think about the next stage in my career, to up-level my ability as a leader and CEO. And what better way to do it at an $8 billion company at the time with Foot Locker, right? A global multinational company, multi-brand. And then Shake Shack, which is a sub-billion dollar but growing brand. And it really stretches the capacity with those three themes I mentioned to you earlier. And they're facing the same exact things, just in different categories, right? So for me, like, all this stuff aligned and made sense. But it was a very different process from what a lot of folks are used to. And the last thing that I'd say is, it wasn't the first time that I had spoken to a recruiter. In fact, a lot of the recruiters that I had spoken to in the past almost have a conversation based on the diversity flavor of the month, right? So for some period of time, 2010 to, let's say, to 2014, it was about Black folk, right? Like 2014 to, even 2018 or so, is woman, right? And I just mean like the attention that's given to it. So depending on what period you're speaking to recruiters, that's what's top of mind for them, because the companies almost have a flavor of the month mentality. And that, coupled with you haven't run $1 billion business yet, right? It's like, okay, so show me on one hand, right, the number of folks you have access to who happen to be Black, who've had those opportunities. And those tend to be the same people recycled on the same boards over and over and over again. And I have to give Foot Locker and Shake Shack the credit here, right? Because they were forward looking enough to recognize, here's a young guy who cares about these three things, which we care about. He's closer to our consumer. The overwhelming majority of our employees look like him, and he has a point of view. And it's my hope that we broke down some barrier of reflection there that will offer more opportunities for folks. So now I'm getting calls from recruiters asking who I know, right? So I have a responsibility now.
It's wonderful. You have no reason to remember this, but I met you at TechCrunch Disrupt in like 2012.
I remember.
Oh, because the crazy part is about it, and I'm getting to a question, is there were like 3 other Black people there. It's Wayne Sutton and Paul Judge. My question is, do you feel an increasing responsibility to be accessible to Black folks? And here's why I ask, is because I talked to Morgan about this. I talked to Charles Hudson about this. Charles says the same thing. Morgan says the same thing. When they're at a conference or just out, all the Black people there want to come see you because you're the one who may get it, right? And so how much of a responsibility do you feel to be accessible, to do things like this conversation, even to give back to the community?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, there are only 24 hours a day. There's only 7 days a week. And you go back to the priority of things that I take priority for, is my faith, my family, my work. I don't care about anything else, right? And And every interaction, every decision that I make, it's like, all right, does this fit my values? If it doesn't, it's not worth the time. And it's really fascinating how how clear your schedule and your time gets when you have a focused determination around, what your values are, right? And you make more time for this, right? Secondly, is it getting in front of my ability to kind of focus on my faith and family? If it does, sorry, right? Because those things take priority. Now to the work thing, is it in line or is it kind of contributory to the three things that I mentioned: demographic shift, brand, tech impact, and the celebration of Black economic empowerment? I know my lane on that progress highway, right? It's not a one-lane highway. I know my lane, and there are other folks that are participating in their lane. It's hard enough for us. I don't need to do redundant things where folks are better in the world than I at that thing, right? So it's my duty. If things are contributing to this goal and mission that I have, assuming that there are enough hours in the day that I participate, right? It is my duty when folks potentially come up to me at a conference to not rush out, right? And it's my duty to prioritize this, assuming it's not getting in the way of those other things in my values, right? The responsibility is so much a responsibility as, my commitment to it. And I've dedicated my life to this for the past 10 years, and I will continue to dedicate my life to it for the rest of my life. Because frankly, for me, I think it's the only thing worth focusing on, right? I think if we can realize some of the things that I hope for in this idea of Black economic empowerment, we will have made so much progress for the secondary and tertiary things that we all want to see done. So yes, it is a responsibility. It's not a burden, because also I know who I am, and I can't be everything to everybody, and that's something I have to reconcile every day, and that's okay. That's okay.
Black Tech Green Money is a production of Blavity Afrotech and is produced by Morgan DeBon and me, Will Lucas, with additional production support by Love Beach, Stephanie Ogbogu, and Raven Earbor. Special thank you to Micah Davis, Sankara Savanyan, like the wine, and yes, that's his real name, and Dominique Wright. Learn more about Tristan Walker and other tech disruptors and innovators at afrotech.com. Go get your money. Peace and love.